And leadership in life, how to make a difference at work and at home. Good morning, I'm Orlando Sanchez, Deputy City Manager. I'm honored to introduce Mr. Paul Butler. Mr. Butler is a speaker, presenter, and entertainer. He excels in the areas of motivation, leadership, customer service, and attitude empowerment. He has dedicated his life as a public servant, serving 27 years in law enforcement. He believes the power of a positive attitude can take you to the top or simply find happiness and pride in your current role. A healthy attitude is often the key to both personal and professional success. This is certainly the case for Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler will illustrate how to take individual talents and apply them in a group setting to make an unstoppable and productive winning team. Please join me in giving Mr. Butler a warm welcome to our great city.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. I am Paul Butler, and I am from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I did 28 years in law enforcement there. I want you to know how exciting it is for a small town southern boy to get to come to the city of Las Vegas. It's beautiful. Everyone has been so nice. This is my third trip out here. I've worked for Chief Michelle Freeman. You have a wonderful staff, and everyone always talks about the wonderful employees. It's like an employee family, and that makes me extra proud to be involved. I want you to know that now it's kind of old hat. I fly into Las Vegas. I know how to get around. I know how to do all that. But I want to tell you about my very first trip here. I was a little nervous. I didn't know exactly what to expect. I knew it was a city where people came in, they gamble, they do all these things. That's all we'd ever heard, shows and dinners. And then they leave, and I thought they probably won't have time to be very friendly. Well, I stayed at one of the casino hotels, and I was downstairs walking around, and I stopped by the high roller Texas Hold'em room. And when they found out I had never played the game, they begged me to participate. And then, not once, but twice, just walking around the casino, ladies walked up to me and said, "Are you lonely? Would you like some company tonight?" Ladies and gentlemen, this is the friendliest city in America. I have a great time here, and I want you to know this. This is a fantastic presentation area, what you're doing here, this Values Conference. It's unique across this country, and I want you to be very proud of the effort that has gone into this. Miss Patsy McFadden had me here. They are working for you all the time. Michelle Freeman heard me speak at an event. She said, it would be perfect for you to come back and speak to my department. Miss Patsy hears me speak, and she says it would be great for the Values Conference. And that's how it unfolds. We can't be just committed to our office and our agencies from 9 to 5. We have to always be on the lookout for doing that. And I want you to take just a moment. Things like this don't just happen by accident. They're certainly not put together at the last moment. I want you to take a moment to give people like Mr. Orlando, Patsy McFadden, Michelle Freeman, Jeff in the back, give them a big round of applause, everyone who had anything to do with this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about life in South Carolina. I was born and raised in Aner, South Carolina, population 536 and a half. Someone got pregnant just the other day. They text me. 536 in Aner, South Carolina. I live on Butler Road. That's where we have a farm, and my family has lived for generations. That's where we're taught our values. When you come to an event like this, I want you to think about what you plan to take away. But what I want to remind you today is where did you learn these values and these leadership principles to start with? For me, it was on that little farm in Aner, South Carolina. My father was born in 1913, had children late in life. He was 53 when I was born, and I have a baby brother, had his last child at 55. He raised corn and kids, that's all he cared about. And he raised his own workers, so he never had to pay anyone. My father survived the Great Depression and was drafted into World War II, served in the Pacific Theater, and was a combat engineer in the Philippines awaiting the invasion of Japan when the war ended. He didn't know anything else but how to work. He came home, and what he did is he took a job with DuPont as a construction worker. Because I tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, while my father was the absolute smartest man I've ever known and the wisest I've ever encountered, he did not even have a high school education. My father believed that the way to the top was to outwork everyone around you, and that became his commitment to his children. 4 boys and a girl. He wanted us to work hard because he believed that was the key to success. Well, that's only partially true. My mom now was the Queen of Hearts. My mom loved her children. That's all she wanted to be, was a mother. And she spent all of her time telling us how wonderful we were and how great we were, how good we looked. She cut our own hair. I see some of my pictures. I know that we didn't look that good. But she saw the beauty in us. She believed in us at every turn. My father was the king of accountability. My father believed that justice should be swift and that the suffering should be lingering. When he spoke, he expected you to move. When you didn't, he expected you to be penalized for it. As I travel, I learned that he believed in what you call corporal punishment. We called it a beating. My father wasn't a tall man, but he was kind of big around, and he had this big leather belt. And when he would take it off to exact that punishment, it sounded like a helicopter taking off. That belt going through those loops, and he stood there like Indiana Jones, staring at you, and he had this saying, "Son, the next time your mind tells you to do that, your butt is going to beg you not to." He was very correct. There were many times when I started to get into mischief or started to get into a little trouble, reaching into that cookie jar to get that extra cookie when my butt said, "Let's talk about this before we go any further." Ladies and gentlemen, accountability is starting to be missing in our society, but that is a cornerstone of success. We must hold ourselves accountable and respect those who are in charge to hold us accountable. Now, my mom offset that accountability with love. My mom was the Queen of Hearts. Everything we did, she told us how wonderful we did it, and we could be anything in life, go do it. I remember being in a church play when I was just 5 years old. I was on that stage, and when I came off, my mom took me by the face and she said, "You were the best one up there, and the best looking." Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't play Jesus, I was a tree, all right? But she could see through that, and she spent her life building us up. Whenever you have accountability, you also must counterbalance it with caring. People have to know that you are doing it for them, not to them, when punishment is involved. I want you to know, I lived in that household where I had a father saying, "Son, I'm worried, you're not doing fast enough, working well enough, not going to make it." And then a mom saying, "You're going to be great, you're doing great things." Well, this all came to a culmination when I wanted to play basketball. I had a realization. I wanted to join the basketball team, and my father said no. He said, "That's something to get you hurt, son, and then who's going to do your chores? If you don't have enough to do around here, I'll find you something else to do." My mom said, "No, let him play. He'll be the best one out there. They need him. Let him be on that team." Well, I barely made that team, and my mom was wrong. I was nowhere near the best. I was about the worst they had. But my father was also wrong. I was in no danger of getting hurt. I never got in a game. The only danger I was in was maybe getting a splinter in my butt from sitting down there daydreaming. Parents didn't go to games back then in South Carolina like they do today. I'm always amazed at the committed parents who travel and watch their children play on everything from the day they start. My parents came to see me one time. They used words like, "We don't have time for that. We don't have fuel for that. We don't have money for that." They came to see me play in one game. Thank God that night we were ahead by about 30 points, all right? And Coach Dan James knew that my parents were in the stands. So with us ahead by 30 points with about 30 seconds left in the game, he walks down to the end of that bench and he says what every athlete dreams of hearing. "Butler, get in there and try not to screw it up." I ran onto that court with my shoes squeaking, and I got lined up just like I'd been doing in practice. I crouched down like this. They threw the ball in. I moved back and forth like this for about 30 seconds. The horn goes off. I never touched the ball, and the game is over. People rush the court to celebrate with the winners, but my mom is the first one to me. My mom takes me by the face just like she did in church, and she said, "You were the best one out there, and the best looking." I don't know why they don't let you play more often. Someone should talk to that coach. And I thought, Lord, don't let her do that. The coach knows why I'm not playing. By that time, my father had made it down out of the stands, and he walked up and said, "Son, if I couldn't do any better than that, I'd quit." I realized at that moment, ladies and gentlemen, at that moment, I realized that neither one of them were correct. And neither one of them really knew my talents, my strengths, or my weaknesses like I did. I couldn't be as poor as my father was afraid I would be, but I would never be as good as my mom dreamed I would be. Self-evaluation is the key to your success. Being able to look at your own strengths and talents. Don't depend on someone else's evaluation to cap how high you can fly. It is up to you to determine how well you can do. Know your weaknesses and embrace them. Work on them every day until they become strengths and not hindrances to your progress. But do not allow yourself to be known only for your strengths, because every one of us has a balance. Someone is good at something and others are not. What we have to do is make sure that there's room at the table for everyone involved. I look at it now, just flash forward. I have 2 daughters, a 22-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I'm not a very good planner, but I make it up by being a really good parent, all right? I'm really involved now. And I think of how my parents motivated us. My father was that king of accountability. So on Saturday mornings when he was in that kitchen, he'd have that cup of coffee before we went out into the fields. Back then we worked from what was called can't see to can't see. In other words, it was dark in the morning when we went out. We came home when it was too dark to finish. He would be in there having that cup of coffee. He'd wash it out, throw it in that sink, and he would say one word, "Boys," that meant everybody get ready. Feet on the floor, shoes on your feet, cereal bowls down, cartoons off. We lined up like little soldiers, went out there and did whatever he told us as long as he told us to do it. Sometimes we dug holes, sometimes we covered them up. I never understood why. We didn't ask, all right? I know it just made him very happy to see us busy. We would walk back into that house, my mom would have dinner cooked, and she would tell us what a wonderful day we'd had and how beautiful we were and all the wonderful things. Flash forward just 30, 40 years. I have my own daughters. Emily is down the hallway the other night. She's my 22-year-old, and I call out to her, "Emily?" Nothing. Dead silence. I don't hear a word. "Emily?" "Yeah?" "Come here." "Why?" "Because I want to talk to you." "We're talking now." "But I want to look at you while I talk to you." "Can it wait?" And I thought, they wouldn't have survived in my father's house. He'd have let them out in the woods like Hansel and Gretel. But let me tell you this, I realize that we create the accountability that is enforced in our own homes and in our own offices. If you aren't happy with the structure, if you aren't happy with the results, what we have to do is change our leadership view. Now we have to be reaching out, and we have to be more tolerant than my father was, but we can't be as lenient as my mother was. What we have to do is find a way to connect with the people today, the workers who are starting now, and we have to steward them along. Conferences like this are incredibly important when we have opportunities like this. Do not waste this as a day out of the office. Do not waste it as a free breakfast and a moment to sit in a comfy chair when you otherwise would be working really hard. The deal is, this should be the hardest day of your life to work, because you're going to hear information. You're going to be exposed to new ideas. And it is your job to assess where you stand right now and how you would like to be in the future. Do not miss an opportunity to learn and to live and to spread it out so that others can enjoy their lives and jobs. Now, I think about what it takes to be a good organization. I took those skills. My very first job outside of a tobacco field was at the Ainer IGA, which is a little grocery store, the only one Ainer had. Jimmy Ray Johnson hired me, and he looked at me and said, "Son, I believe you'd be good for this job." I was 15 years old. He said, "Would you be interested in the IGA pilot program?" I said, "I'd love to be a pilot, sir." He said, "Well, bag those groceries and pilot in that car." All right? I did everything in addition to bagging groceries, ladies and gentlemen. I was mopping floors and pulling up produce, cleaning bathrooms. I was lining up the cans, burning the trash, filling drink machines, and doing one job that I did not like. It was called pushing the parking lot. In the heat of the summer in South Carolina, you melt like a stick of butter. And everybody would be in the fields working, so the parking lot would be empty, and we didn't know anything about any blowers. And certainly no vehicle came around and swept up our mess. They gave me a broom about this wide and put me out, and I pushed that parking lot. That's what I did, is swept up every grain of sand, picked up every piece of trash, and carried it away. I did not like that job. What you don't know about me, ladies and gentlemen, is I tan like a cup of milk, all right? I just curl and smell. I hated being out in the sun. And one day I realized that that one negative in my job was causing me to dislike the entire job. All right? That's how that seed of deceit works. We start convincing ourselves that they're not paying us enough, they're not treating us well enough, that this one job is ruining the whole job. I went home that day and my father asked me, "How's work going, son?" And I told him it was going great, because that's what he wanted to hear. But I said, "There's only one job I don't like that I do out there." He sat up very straight and got that serious look where I knew I'd said something wrong. I just hadn't figured out what it was yet. He said, tell me what it is you don't like, son. And I said, I don't like pushing that parking lot. They hired me to be a bag boy, but now they have me being a glorified janitor. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. He told me 2 lessons that day that I followed the rest of my life and made me the success that I ended up being. The youngest police chief in the state of South Carolina's history at 22, and the youngest chief deputy at 33. I want you to know, folks, you can work your way to the top with a good attitude, and he told me the secret to that. He said, what someone has you doing when they are paying you is none of your business. I understand union contracts and I understand all the agreements, but how many times do you work with someone that every time you ask them to do something, they wave a job description in your face or talk about something being above their level of pay? Folks, when you are on a team and in a family, it means that you are willing to do whatever it takes to make the entire group successful. What we have to do is not hold ourselves back. There are enough people willing to do that for you. What you have to be willing to do is step up and take whatever challenge there is, make whatever difference there is. The next thing he told me was a very good one too. He said, if you don't like doing that job, you and I had better be the only 2 who ever know about it. Folks, I didn't know what that meant back then, but when I took a job and became a leader and a supervisor, I knew exactly what he meant. How many times do you work with someone in the office that comes in and they feel like it's their life mission to tell you all the things they don't like? Look around here. You are in the most beautiful structure I've spoken in ever. This is a wonderful town with great opportunity and wonderful tax base, and they're doing wonderful things with it that invest back in their citizens and back into you. What you want to do is look for the blessings everywhere. You can find trash blowing in any street, but it sure is nice to have a paved highway to drive on. Don't forget the big picture. And that's where we stand right now. When you talk about values, think about what we just said. Accountability that has to be offset with caring, and a willingness to do anything to make everyone successful. That followed me through my life, and I want you to know this. Ironically, what we don't mention in my big fancy bio, it looks like my mom wrote it. All right? It's all my successes and all the wonderful things that I've had to do in life. But I want you to know, ironically, when I left that bag boy's job, I went to visit my sister in Würzburg, Germany. I fell in love with it and I stayed and I had to get a job. I went to an officers club and applied, and he looked back at that desk and said, son, I'd love to hire you, but all I have is a janitor's job. I said, I'd love to be a janitor. And if you give me that chance, I'll be the best janitor you have. And if I stay a janitor, that won't be your fault, that'll be mine. Because my goal was to outwork everyone around me and be noticed for my talent that existed. Not because I outlived or outweighted everyone around me and finally got promoted through seniority. We have to make sure that we are working every day to show our best. And we have to make sure that we are planning right now for jobs that we do not know even exist. Not everyone can be in charge, but everyone here can be a leader. What you have to do is look around at your coworkers. Find a way to be a kind and caring ear. Hold yourself accountable first, but do not be afraid to hold them accountable. You know the ones who are cutting the corners, the ones who are headed for trouble, the ones who are not making the difference they could and they're slowly slipping away. We can't wait for someone to come along and get them in line. It's our job to reach out to them and ask, what's going on in your life and how can I help you? How many times do you see someone get in trouble and everybody rolls their eyes and said, boy, I could see that coming? Well, the question is, what did you do to stop it? Ladies and gentlemen, if you really embrace this as a family, you don't have to like everyone, but you do have to love everyone. We should care deeply for one another and care about this city and what they're trying to do. Don't waste an opportunity to make a difference, because at some point your career is going to be over. And what is it you plan to leave behind? I found out that the big titles and the jobs and all of the little asterisks beside the name that says he was the youngest in the world, well, that changes very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. What we have to do in an organization is look out at how to make a difference, and the way to do that through leadership is listening. I heard a story one time about an older man and his wife. They were growing old together, and he was excited about all the things they had done. And they were going to spend their lives together talking about the wonderful history and the past that they had. The problem is, she started losing her hearing. It scared him because he thought, what if I'm not able to communicate with this woman I love about all the wonderful things we've done? He talked to a doctor and he said, what can I do to help and stop this? He said, how bad is it? He said, I don't know. He said, well, tell me how far away from her you have to be before she can hear. So he walks home that night and walks up to the kitchen door, and there she is with her back turned at the stove, working on something for dinner that night, and he thinks this is a perfect opportunity. He stands at the doorway and he calls out to her, "Hi, honey, what are you cooking?" Dead silence. He walks halfway over the room and he calls out again, "Hi, honey, what's for dinner tonight?" Not a word. He finally has tears in his eyes as he realizes it's worse than he thought it was, and he walks up to her ear and he says, "Hi, honey, what are you cooking for dinner tonight?" She said, "I told you 3 times now, meatloaf. Go get your hearing checked." What we have to realize, ladies and gentlemen, what we have to realize is just because everyone is not responding to us the way we want them to, it doesn't mean they are the ones going deaf. Everybody is sending messages to you. Everybody is putting out their opinions to you. You can see it in their face and their body language, how they handle things, how they're performing. What we have to do is care so much that we're involved, that we listen more than we try to lead. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership is built on just a handful of beautiful things, and it's about respecting one another. It's about respecting yourself, making sure that you don't cut those corners to put someone else in a bind. It's also about responsibility, not just responsibility for the duties you're given, but responsibility for your partner, your family, those around you. You have to care about everyone. I realize in the legacy that I leave behind is only going to be as strong as my daughters get to enjoy. How do I want people to talk about me later on? Relationships are incredibly important, and we can never miss a chance to strengthen those by showing our best and pulling the best out of others. When one person is successful, we all are successful. That's what a team is about. A family never lets anyone fall. You never give up on anyone. Now, not everyone can do this job. Just because you make it look easy doesn't mean everyone can do it. There are some who aren't fit, but usually that's a character flaw, not an ability deficit. What we have to do is work to identify those folks together. I think about my time together at that office. I'll tell you, with the power of caring about one another, knowing that someone is watching and that they have your back is incredibly powerful. When I started that little job at Aner Police Department, after I was a janitor and a bag boy, I was the most proud officer they had ever hired. They called me in and gave me an old tarnished badge. Looked like it had been left out in the weather. They gave me a gun, a little 6-shooter, and a speed strip with 6 extra bullets. I thought this must be an exciting job. I already need extra ammo, right? They gave me a pair of handcuffs and a little thing called a slapjack. It was a little piece of lead bound in leather. And they said, carry that in your back pocket. That's your backup. That's all you had. We didn't have walkie-talkies. We didn't have anyone else working but me and Aner at the time. And we didn't have bulletproof vests. They gave me a uniform of the last person they had either fired or had quit. And they said, grow into that uniform. Apparently he was about 4 inches shorter than I am. And when I put those pants on, it looked like a set of capris. But I promise you, I stood in that mirror with those high water pants, that old tarnished badge, that outdated weapon, and that weathered uniform, and I had the biggest smile of anybody who had ever become a police officer. It wasn't about the money, ladies and gentlemen. They were only paying me $12,500 a year. The very first rule, and the only time I've ever had a rule enforced on me, was when they called me in and said, Butler, you have to go home at some time. You can't work all day and all night. Let me tell you this, be thankful for the job that you have and the money that you draw for that. Many people would trade places with you, not just in this city, but around this world today without ever knowing exactly what you do, because you already have more than they ever will. Be proud of where you are and what you have been provided. It's what you do with it that determines whether or not you earned it. I looked at that job as an opportunity, folks, and it built me into being the chief of police 1 year later. But it didn't start without all the struggles. In Aner, South Carolina in the 1980s, you did not have to attend the police academy before you became a police officer. The idea was that they would have a field training officer lead you around for a year, and at that time they would decide whether or not you could make it, and they would send you to the academy if they wanted to keep you. Well, Aner wasn't known for its wonderful field training officer program. It was me working by myself. They gave me advice and said, go out and see what you can see. I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm looking for. They said, well, you have good parents. If you see someone doing something that they wouldn't allow you to do, check it out. Well, my parents didn't let me do anything. Ladies and gentlemen, when you don't know anything about the laws or the Constitution or the policies and procedures of life, you can run the safest city in America, and I did. You were out after dark, I put those blue lights on and said, what are you doing? Time to go home, all right? I was like everybody's daddy out there. I want you to know I learned a lot and I laughed a lot. And I'm going to tell you about the very first call that I answered all on my own. My mom was worried about me policing. I was 21 years old, looked like a baby, and she didn't know that I was ready for it. And she told everybody in that town, I told you, small town. She told everyone, please keep an eye out for Paul. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye on him. Watch him, please. Let me know how he's doing. I worry about him. Keep him in your prayers. Well, my mom was always spreading the word, and people would ask, and they'd give her reports. Well, the very first call that I answered on my own was a domestic situation. Now, we did not have that at my home. I want you to know we had no drinking, no smoking, no cussing, no ugly talk, and people who did that weren't allowed where I lived. So it was amazing to me the first time I walked into a home where they were doing all of that at one time in the middle of the day, with two little kids getting a front row seat on the couch. It was mind-numbing for me to watch what was happening as they talked so ugly to one another and were proud of what they were saying. Now, we did have a foolproof system while we didn't have backup in Aner. After 20 minutes when you were out of the vehicle, if you had not checked in or cleared, they would call the house phone and ask to speak to you. If the people didn't allow you to talk on the phone, they would send someone to come find your body, okay? Foolproof was the system. Nothing could go wrong. I don't know how long I had been out there, but all of a sudden the phone rings and the man storms angrily over to the phone and he grabs it off the wall and he says, what do you want? Yes, he is. Hold on. I walk over and he says, it's for me. I take the phone because I assume it's my dispatcher, Tommy Martin. I pick up the phone and I say, Officer Butler, and it's my mom. My mom has called that house and asked to speak to me. I was a little embarrassed and I didn't want them to know it was my mom, so I acted like it was my dispatcher. She said, what are you doing at that house? I said, we have a domestic in progress. I should be clear soon. She said, you know they're crazy, right? I said, affirmative. Folks, I want you to know, Aner in the 80s was a very different place. Everybody I knew carried a knife, and most people I knew carried a gun. It was a very dangerous place to work sometimes, certainly by today's standards, but I spent all my time talking people into putting guns down or taking weapons away from them. It was a pleasure to work, but I have to admit, I was afraid sometimes in my life, no doubt about it. But never more afraid than I was the very next moment when my mom said, do you want me to come up there? Negative. That will not be necessary, I'm clearing now. I disconnected and I told those people, we're about to make some decisions because trouble is on the way. It is amazing what you can do. It is amazing what you can do. The fear you are willing to face when you believe that someone is watching and they have your back. They're not watching to get you in trouble. They're not watching to have you fall or fail. What they want is the best for you. And I policed those dark nights and those lonely times knowing that my mom had me in her prayers and cared about me and would check on me and come to me if I needed. Folks, we are losing a generation right now because they believe we're watching, but they're not convinced it's because we care. If you really want to make a difference in the city of Las Vegas, you want to make a difference in this family, let people know how much you care. Let them know that you're there to catch them if they fall. Don't sit and wait for people to stumble and point and laugh at it and wonder whether or not it's going to be entertainment or jokes. Don't put it on YouTube and broadcast it around. I don't know what all's going with that. But I tell you this, the strongest teams in the world and the families that are the closest in the world have convinced everyone there that they have a place, that they're welcome, and that they will never be allowed to fall or fail. That's what teamwork is all about. It's what you have here. My daughter now has gone out into the work world, and it's amazing how quickly things change. Holly Butler is 15 years old, and she is an amazing young lady. She couldn't wait to get to work because she wanted to earn her own money. Holly was excited to go to Andy's Pizza to work as a little waitress. I suggested if you're ever traveling through Aner, South Carolina, the gateway to the Grand Strand, stop in at Andy's Pizza, ask for the cutest waitress in the place, and I suggest you tip really big. Holly could not wait to get out and work, and it's funny to watch those young minds working. I gave her some incentive. I told her, I said, Holly, I'm going to allow you to pick out an item that I normally would not buy for you, but if you save your money, I'm going to let you purchase that. She chose an Apple Watch, all right? And she's correct. That's something I would not buy for her, okay? She figures it up. It's about $300. She starts figuring the money she's going to make each week. They pay her $7.50 an hour. And she starts deciding it's going to take me this many weeks to reach $300. And I said, well, now, honey, that's a great idea. Let me know how that goes. Well, after her first check comes in, she comes home and she says, Daddy, there's money missing out of my check. Oh, yeah. I told her, I said, mine too, honey. I said, those are your taxes. She said, what are they doing with that? And I said, that's where we pay for things, our defense and all of the things like that, retirement, our Social Security. She said, I did not sign up for any of that, Daddy. I said, neither did I, honey. Well, the very next thing that comes up is she says, well, this is going to take me longer to get to $300, right? And I like how she's learning. So then I tell her, I said, well, now listen, when you purchase that watch for $300, you're not including the tax you're going to have to pay. She said, oh no, Daddy, they're already taking that out of my check. What we have right now are young people entering this market. Thank God she is 15 learning these lessons, because the people who are waiting until they get so educated that they want to walk into the market at 26 and tell everyone how it should be done, that they have finally put their time in a classroom, but they do not have a work history, we are going to suffer with them if someone doesn't teach them. That is your job. That's not leadership's job. Embrace these folks and guide them through. The people I watched as we went to hire the last few times, they told me they came in about all these wonderful visions they had. But I looked at their packet and they had 0 work history. More degrees than a thermometer, but absolutely no work history. Folks, after talking with them a while, I wouldn't let them house sit my cat, much less go out and deal with people during an emergency. What we have to do is start putting something inside of people other than just in their minds. We have to get it in their hearts. I learned that lesson in a classroom with Holly Butler. She taught me in the 3rd grade. They invited me to speak at her class and also read a book on Dr. Seuss Day. And before we disconnected, they asked one question. They said, Mr. Butler, would you mind wearing your uniform? I said, I would love to wear my uniform. Why? And they said, the children love a police officer. Well, I thought, what a great time. 3rd grade, Dr. Seuss book, this isn't above my level. I embraced it, right? I get my uniform on and I walk into that classroom, and I have to admit it was immediate. The whispers were immediate. Look, it's a police officer. Look at the police officer. We've got a police officer with us today. And then the statement that changed my life. Holly Butler's daddy is a police officer. I realized that how I perform and how I behave affects how they view Holly Butler. She's either going to benefit or suffer based on how I perform. That is what many of us are forgetting these days. The legacy we're leaving behind, our others are going to inherit. What we have to do is always do our best and be our best. I decided to put that book down and talk to them about something more important that day. I asked a simple question when I sat in that big rocking chair. Boys and girls, how do you know that I am a police officer? Every hand went up in the air. When you know the answer at Daner Elementary, you want everyone to know it, right? Ooh, 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 ooh. And I call on a little boy and he says, you're wearing a gun and a badge and a uniform. I said, that's right, that's part of it, but that's not what makes me a police officer. What if I were wearing my suit? Would I still be a police officer? Only about 2/3 of the hands went up, and the little girl said, yes, detectives wear that. I'm like, okay, well, that's not what I was meaning, but we'll go one step further. What if I wore my blue jeans and a t-shirt? Would I still be a police officer? About 1/3 of the hands went up, and a little boy said, yeah, narcotics agents wear that. I said, boy, they sure are smart these days, aren't they? So let's boil it down to the brass tacks. Let's talk about exactly what I'm trying to get at. Boys and girls, if I showed up here today in just my pajamas, only my pajamas, would I still be a police officer? Only one hand went up. And the little boy said, no, you'd be a fireman then. I saw my fire guy back there. I could not resist. He just ended my time. Folks, the same message I talked to them about that day is the same message I'm here to deliver to you. It is never the uniform or the position or the pay raise that makes you who you are. It's always what's inside. Do not miss opportunities to show people what's really underneath there. That you have a heart, and that heart beats with passion. That passion is shown with pride, and that pride is what makes you a professional. That uniform that I wore for 28 years never did a thing until I put it on. The magic was inside. What you have to do is work those miracles yourself. You've got to be the one that takes the lead. You have to be the one that makes the difference. What I'm trying to do is instill in my daughters that they can do anything. I'm just like my mom. You are the one who can do anything. You are the best and the best looking. But what I never want them to forget, is that accountability that my father talked about. If you do not hold yourself to the highest standard, if you only get your standard from the policy and procedures, that is the minimum standard, and it will eventually cause you to fail. Our values do not come from the policies and procedures. The policies and procedures are to come from our values. They are to reflect the priorities of leadership. And they are to be embraced by the people who understand that if I work here, they expect the absolute best. Those are the things that are going to make your career and make your life. When you finish, it won't just be about drawing a retirement check. You need to be able to look back and think about the days that you made a difference that no one else could have in your position, because you are special. There is something special inside of you. You are different, and you have different talents. Wait for that timing. Find a way to be on the team and to take leadership and responsibility for everyone around you. Don't wait until some magical promotion or some pay raise to start really showing your talent. The people who chase pay raises and promotions rarely deserve either. The ones who are the most successful are the ones who are writing their resume today for a job that they do not even know exists tomorrow. Now, the last thing I want you to do, while I didn't give you a big PowerPoint or a handout, I am going to give you some homework. I need you to start assessing where you are with this agency and organization. Heard a story about a man and woman one time celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. 50th wedding anniversary. The problem with that was most of their friends had died and passed on. Their children had grown up and moved on, and they were all by themselves. But they decided to go out and celebrate just like they had every other time in their lives on their first date they remembered. He got in his suit, slicked back his hair, went out and got that old 30-year-old truck and pulled it around front to pick her up. She walked out in her little hat and her dress, her little purse on her arm, and her little white gloves. She climbed into the front seat of that old truck, and they drove across town going to a restaurant where they had gone on their very first date 50 years ago. They were happy. When they pulled up behind a truck that was one of these big monster trucks, do you know the ones I'm talking about? The big wheels and the big pipes and all that. And a teenage couple's driving this, and they're in love. They're taking advantage of that 3 minutes at the red light to show how much they love one another. They're making out, and it looks like a two-headed monster. You can't tell one from the other. All of a sudden, the old lady looks over to the man, and she says, "Do you see that?" He says, "I sure do." She said, "Do you remember when we used to be like that?" He said, "I sure do." She said, "Well, I wonder what changed." He said, "I don't know. I'm still sitting in the same seat." Ladies and gentlemen, this is your homework. Look around at where you are. If you don't feel close to the organization, you don't feel close to your family anymore, you don't feel close to your God, you don't feel close to your children, your parents, whatever it is, wherever that splinter is under your skin, I need you to look around and see who moved. There is a good chance, a very good chance, that you are the one who has changed. Organizations stay the same. The values often stay the same. The things I'm talking about here, my father taught me, and they were the things that were taught to him. This opportunity is nothing new. It's an opportunity to reflect back on who you once were and who you hope to be. Every one of us has someone to thank. When you leave here today, I also want you to become more thankful. I want you to thank people for this opportunity to be here and the opportunity to work for the city of Las Vegas. I want you to go home and I want you to thank the ones who are waiting there, who have made this career extra special because they have sacrificed and suffered while you have served. It matters. No one gets through a career and makes a difference without someone else being at home and doing without. I can remember my daughter Emily sitting in the floor with a big calendar and a pen saying, "Daddy, what day are we going to celebrate my birthday on this year?" Because we didn't do it when it was her birthday. We did it when I was available. Folks, I want to make that time up. Every one of us has someone to thank. I need you to find those people and do it. Don't do it the way I did. We have to be reminded every now and then. My wife and I were going out for our 20th wedding anniversary. Our 20th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to make it very special. I reserved a restaurant at Myrtle Beach, the nicest I could afford. It was an IHOP. I thought on a special occasion she deserved something with an international flavor. But I had been working at the office hard that day, and I wheeled up in the yard, and all I had time to do was blow the horn because we were going to be late, and she ran out like Cinderella and jumped in the front seat, and we take off toward Myrtle Beach where we have our reservations. And I'm spending that time telling her about how tough my day was and what a wonderful job I have and what a great job I've done in life. Something about me still wants me to convince people that I'm worth it, that I'm valuable, and I'm doing my part, and they're lucky to have me. She was listening and nodding and supporting me just like she should and always has. When all of a sudden we passed through Conway, South Carolina, where there was a utility group down in the ditch tunneling under the road. This was a Friday night at 6:30, so I knew it had to be some emergency. But the boy who was down there working the shovel, I recognized as her high school sweetheart. And I thought, like, God sent this to me all on my own. I said, "Honey, wasn't that your high school sweetheart down in that ditch?" She didn't even look around. She said, "I believe it was," and that's all she said. Guys, I'm just talking to you now. At that point, let it go. They know what you're talking about. They know what you're getting at. But I couldn't. I was really feeling it that day. I said, "Well, I couldn't help but think. Here we are going to dinner at a nice restaurant. We just left our nice home and our wonderful children, and we've built this future together, and here you are, married to the chief deputy of Horry County. I just think that's really special." She said, "You know, you have done well. I'm proud of you." And that's all she said. Guys, at that point, let it go, all right? But I couldn't. I had to go for the kill. I had to go for the kill, ladies and gentlemen. I was feeling pretty big about myself at the moment, so I went ahead and boiled it down. I said, "Well, I guess what I'm getting at is here tonight you are going to dinner celebrating your 20th wedding anniversary, married to the chief deputy of Horry County. And if you were married to him tonight, you'd be married at a ditch digger and sitting home alone." She didn't even break a smile. She said, "No, if I'd married him, he'd be the chief deputy of this county." All right? Do not wait. Do not wait for someone to humble you, to find humility. Right now is the time for you to look around and name all of the people in your life who have made a difference, and you seek them out and find a way to let them know how much you appreciate them. Whether it's this opportunity or whether it was this job, whether it is that promotion or the future, whether you go home and tell people how much they've made your life special, or whether you reconnect with someone you've moved away from. You find a way to go ahead and build those bridges back, because the only thing worth holding on to in this life is each other. Do not let things stand in the way of your progress. Do not let this city fail because you decided to stand idly by. What you have to do is give your best every day. When you get home tonight, I want you to say in your mind who you have to thank. For me, those are people like my family, my father. They've passed away now. But the people who really made it special to me, I spend some time, I thank God for this opportunity. My faith has been incredibly important in my value system. And it's part of the reason I've been successful, the largest part. It has put me on this stage in front of you here today, and what I don't want you to do is waste this time. I've flown all the way from South Carolina, and they've invested in me for a reason. When you get back, I need you to look at your accountability. I want you to look at how much you care. I want to talk about your responsibility and your respect for others. I need you to evaluate your relationships, and are they built on the passion that they should be, the pride in your work, and the professionalism this city deserves. Those are the things that are going to make a difference. Find new ways to find new people to thank for what they do. The ones who clean this place, the ones who provided that meal, the ones who sweep those parking lots. Those are the absolute most important people who walk among us and often never feel the appreciation they deserve. It is our responsibility to make them feel that. They'll never get it through a pay raise or a promotion. It's just not possible. You have the ability to do great things. And the greatest things you will do in this world, in your life, are the things you do for others. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go back to my casino and see if those ladies are still around. I'm going to see if those high rollers will still have me at the table. And I'm going to enjoy my time in Las Vegas, because it was a blessing to be with you here today. I hope you feel the same about the time you've shared with me. I wish you the best of luck with this conference. I wish you the best of luck with your career. I wish you the best of luck with your families and your future. You'll be in my prayers. I ask you do the same for me. If any of you believe that you know someone who needs these services, I do have a website and a card that I would like to pass out. Spread that word that you loved it and it was wonderful. If you did not appreciate this or understand or like it, I'd appreciate if you keep that to yourself. Seriously, what do you know about public speaking? But I do want you to know, being with you today was an incredible blessing in my whole week and my life. Thank you for the time and attention and the opportunity. Good luck, Las Vegas. God bless you.